to the Pulsating Biology, and in today's video we are covering the topic cardiac cycle of chapter Transport in Humans for the O-Levels Biology. When you talk about the cardiac cycle, you need to understand what is meant by cardiac cycle initially. So cardiac cycle are basically the sequence of events. What are those sequence of events? We are going to talk about it, but before that, you need to understand the sequence of events that takes place during the one heartbeat. And for that, you need to understand the heart in a more detail of the human. Let's have a look at this diagram. This is a very rough diagram of the human heart, which have four chambers. It has the right atrium, the right ventricle. Below right atrium, we have the right ventricle. Then we have the left atrium, and then we have the left ventricle. Please do understand that whatever is your right, and whatever is your left is your left, because the camera is virtual. So we have the left ventricle. So basically we have two ventricles and the two atria. These are the right side and the left side. The right and the left side is separated by a membrane which is termed as the septum. This is the basic diagram that you need to understand about the human heart. Furthermore, we need to understand that basically from the body, the blood enters into the right atrium through the superior vena cava. So on the superior vena cava or the inferior vena cava that is present on that enters from the below the side of the right atrium, but let's consider the superior vena cava for this diagram. When you talk about the right atrium, the deoxygenated blood enters into the right atrium, then it is pumped into the right ventricle through the valves. From the right ventricle, the blood is transferred to the lungs to get oxygenated. Once the blood is oxygenated into the lungs, it is transferred to the left atrium. From the left atrium, once it is contracted, it allows the blood to flow into the left ventricle. And from the left ventricle, we say that the walls of the left ventricle are thicker than all of the other chambers. Why? Because it has to transfer the blood from the left ventricle to the entire body, or the parts of body that require the blood. That's why we say that since it has to bear with a lot of pressure, we say that the walls of the left ventricle are much more thicker than all of the other parts of the heart. This is the common working of the heart, and whenever we say that the blood is entering into the right atrium and leaving the heart from the left ventricle, we say that this is termed as the one single heartbeat, that is the movement of blood twice from the heart. And now let's talk about the sequence of events that allows the transfer of the blood twice, that makes up the one heartbeat. At the first pointer, we need to understand that the atria contract. Basically, at the first sequence of event, there is a contraction of the atria. So the atria contract, that forces the blood into the ventricles. At the time when the atria contract, the ventricles are relaxed. After a short pause, now at the second part of the event, we say now this time the ventricles contract and the atria relaxes. Once the ventricle contracts, there is a rise in pressure causes the atrioventricular valves to close. Now, these atrioventricular valves basically function as preventing the backflow of the blood. Backflow of the blood. Backflow of the blood into the atria. This produces a sound that is termed as the lub sound. This produces a sound that is termed as the lub sound. The semilunar valves open. Blood flows from the right ventricle and the left ventricle into pulmonary arc and the aortic arc, respectively. Alright, once you understand the function of valve, let's move on to the third pointer, which tells us that as the ventricles contract, the atria relaxes. Do understand that they work very constant to one another. Their working is very, very constant. Whenever the atria relaxes, the ventricles contract, and at the beginning, when the atria contracts, the ventricle relaxes. Once the right atrium receives the blood from the vena cava, while the left atrium receives the blood from the pulmonary veins. This time we say that the ventricles now relax. Ventricles now relax. This fall in pressure causes the semilunar valves to close. Now, semilunar valves close, causing the same function, that is the backflow of the blood, and this time it produces a softer sound that is termed as the dub sound. This sound was produced by the opening of the valve, and this sound is produced by the closure of the valve. Both of them basically prevents the backflow of the blood. This time now at the fourth sequence, we say now the atria will contract again and the whole cycle repeats itself. This is the entire cardiac cycle and the working of the human heart that allows the movement of the blood twice from the heart. Now, let's cover some topics that are related to your MCQs and you must know in the point of view of the human heart. What is a ventricular systole? Ventricular systole, number one, understand that we are talking about the ventricles that are the lower chambers of the heart. Now, what is meant by the systole? Ventricular systole means there is a contraction of the ventricles. The systole means there is a contraction of the ventricles. Whereas the ventricular diastole mean the ventricular above the ventricle and diastole mean the relaxation. So whenever there is a relaxation of ventricles, we say that it is termed as the ventricular dystole. A ventricular systole and a ventricular dystole makes up a one heartbeat. This is the one heartbeat, that means that blood is transported to the heart twice. There is a short pause between the two heartbeats. What happens after that? One heartbeat basically lasts for almost 0.8 seconds. After that short pause between the two heartbeats, the rate of heartbeat varies with the age and the size of the individual. For example, an average heartbeat of an adult is almost 72 times per minute. On the average of a minute, a human heart that of an adult basically beats 72 times. Note that the atria and the ventricles work alternatively. When the atria contract, the ventricular relaxes. Similarly, when the ventricle relaxes, the atria contracts. That's why we term this as the systole and the diastole.